And that's actually very much reasonable if you think about it, because if you do not understand how something works, very rarely and difficultly, you're going to be able to approach it with constants, right? And in this case, we're looking for constancy, because what we want is to be able to, well, to have a performance that is always reliable and stable. That is to say, if you, for example, this very much, or this very same weekend, when we are practicing the reading section with you, get, for example, 25 or 30 in your average score, then of course you want to attain the same score on the exam, right? And if you get, for example, 15 in the simulation, then you want that to be a good picture of your actual performance, just in case you need to improve before taking the actual exam, right? So as I say, I think it's a matter of understanding how the questions work. And that is exactly what I'm going to be teaching you tonight. Okay, so please accompany me. I have the presentation right here, and let's start with it. Okay, let's go then with the different types of questions you'll find in this section. Okay, now I just want to explain very quickly that the reason why we are able to draw this sketch, let's say, of different types of questions is because, let me say this, the content of the TOEFL exam constantly varies, which means that, for example, I remember the last time I took the TOEFL exam, in my reading section, there was a passage about whales. And I remember this one especially because it was very difficult for me to understand it. I've never been that much familiarized with marine biology, and I guess it's because I'm from Bolivia and I have, well, at least, of course, in my country, I've never had the opportunity to go to the ocean. Of course, in other countries, yes, but it's not, let's say, a topic that I feel very much confident about. So I was struggling a little bit to understand, etc. But I remember that topic, and I can tell you for sure that the same reading passage I got the last time I took the TOEFL exam is not going to appear to you, because, as I mentioned, ETS is constantly renewing its material. They constantly create more and more and more reading passages, more and more and more listenings, more and more and more exercises for the speaking section, for the writing section. So the content always varies. Now, the way they ask for the information in the reading section always remains very much straightforward and stable. Okay? Why? Because, dear students, the way they ask for the questions is always the same. Now, what they ask for is different. As I say, the content varies, but how they ask for that information, the way they request information out of you, it's always the same. And that's why we are able to draw this sketch here, and I can present you the different types of questions you will find in this section, okay? So let's go. Let us start with this one, which is called the vocabulary question, and it's very simple to understand. The TOEFL reading vocabulary questions are designed to test your knowledge of words or phrases that are commonly used in academic or non-academic contexts. Each vocabulary item consists of a sentence with one word or phrase highlighted, okay? Now, this type of question, dear students, as I think its name indicates, basically asks you to respond to what is the meaning of a particular word. Now, the way that this question is delivered is this one. Look at it. It says, what does the word distant, in this case, mean in this context? And by context, they mean a sentence they give you that contains the alluded word they are asking you for. That is to say, they're going to ask for the meaning of a word that is within a sentence or a particular phrase in the paragraph you are reading, okay? So you're always going to have that context or background. That is to say, the sentence, the immediate sentence that somehow, as I say, hosts the word they're asking for, okay? In this case, we have this context and it's this sentence. Let us read it. It's difficult to get young people to plan for their old age, which seems very much distant to them. Now look at this question. It's very interesting. It's asking for what the word distant mean in this context. Notice that is very important because there may be different words like this one in your reading. Maybe there are 5 or 4 distant words in your passage. Nonetheless, they are merely asking you here for this word, distant in this context, that is to say, in this sentence, okay? So please don't get confused. Now, as I say, all questions in the TOEFL exam are multiple choice. Therefore, as you can see here, what they are doing is to offer you some possible answers, right? And as I said, the only thing you have to do is to respond to what does the word distant, in this case, mean in this sentence or context, all right? Let me give you some recommendations before I tell you the correct answer. Even if you think you know what the word could mean, remind that context is the transcendental source that gives each word its meaning. This is very important, and I think that it is something that I would like to discuss here with you. I think, and I am very much, let's say, I am very much unsatisfied with how at least the Bolivian government has managed education in the last years. Because when I was in high school, what my language professor told me was to go to the dictionary every single time I didn't know the meaning of a word. And that is actually incorrect, because it is not a dictionary what defines the meaning of a word. The dictionary merely presents you certain options and possible meanings of the word in a particular context. But as I say, context is a transcendental source, gives each word its meaning. If you want to know the word, or excuse me, the meaning or the significance of a word that you're not particularly sure about, the only way you can do such a thing for sure is by looking at the context in which this particular word is placed into. The context, that is to say, the particular situation and a scenario in which this word is applied, is the only way you can actually know what the word means, yes or yes, because the context never lies. It's the context what defines every single meaning of the word, okay? So, as I say, the correct manner to respond this type of question is not by having a lot of words memorized in your head, if you were thinking about that. Many people do this, by the way. They memorize a lot of words and they have all that very long vocabulary on their heads. And when the time comes, they find these questions and they read them, they remind the meaning and just click on the answer they consider to be most accurate. Nonetheless, it's not a healthy practice if you think about it, because in this case, dictionaries are not necessarily, as I mentioned, a transcendental source to derive this meaning from. So the best manner to respond this type of question, dear students, okay, for those of you who are joining us as well, the vocabulary questions merely ask us for defining the meaning of a particular word within a context or sentence. And the way you do so is by paying attention to the context in which the word is placed. In this case, for example, let us read the context we have. It says, it's difficult to get young people to plan for their old age, which seems very distant to them. Now, this context here, if you reflect upon it, what it's telling you is, try to imagine when you were a child. And when you were a child, your grandpa came to you and told you, hey, dear grandson, have you ever thought about getting married someday? And at that time, you would say to him, right, when you were, I don't know, 15, for example, you would say to him, come on, grandpa, I'm very much young for that type of relationship. Please, that's very distant to me. Don't bother me, right? That is something that you would have likely said to him. Now, think about that. If in that particular scenario, which of course is more or less the meaning of this context we have, that when people are in their young age, they are very much, let's say, reluctant to plan for their future life. What you're saying when you express, come on, grandpa, that's very distant to me with regard to marriage. The only thing you're saying is, hey, that's very far away from me. I am 15 years old. I'm going to think about marriage when I am 30, 35. I don't want to think about that. I just want to go out to parties and to have fun with my friends, right? It's what you think when you are young. So in this context, of course, the word distant means far away. But notice, and as I say, this very same word could mean something absolutely different in other contexts. For example, if I tell you, being the president of Bolivia is very distant to me. What do I mean by that? Of course, I'm not saying that it's very far away from me, because it's not as if at some point in the future, I am going to be the president, yes or yes. Because if I would say, or if I were to say to you, like, oh, come on, that's very far away to me, what I would be saying is, I don't know, in 10, 20 years, I'm going to be the president. But that is not true, because nobody knows his future or her future, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen later. I cannot tell you for sure if I am not going to be, or I will be the president of Bolivia. But if I say, come on, man, being the president of Bolivia is very distant to me, the only thing I'm expressing in that context is that personally, I consider it to be very impossible or unlikely, right? So I'm saying, come on, man, being the president of Bolivia is very distant to me. What I'm saying, it's impossible, right? I'm not saying it's well, far away, because as I mentioned, well, nobody can tell whether or not you're going to be president in the future, as you can tell marriage, for example, because, well, at least normally people do get married in the future. So at least you can say that that's far away from me. But well, with regard to being the president of a nation, you cannot, as I say, foretell that for sure. So, well, I think the idea is very clear, right? That this thing can mean something very different depending on the context you place that word into. So please, in order to respond to these questions, dear students, vocabulary questions, read the context, try to imagine it, try to internalize the context, and think about it, okay? It's the reasoning how you're gonna come up with the correct response, okay? Is there any question with regards to this type of question? Something that I could clarify, that I could explain? Please tell me. Questions about the vocabulary question? Is there anything?
No, teacher.
All right, thank you very much. Great. Awesome, so I think that we're gonna continue then with the next question, okay? If there are no more questions. So we are in the second type of question. As you can see, this one is called TOEFL reading purpose question, okay? And let us discuss it very briefly. So the TOEFL reading purpose questions will test your ability to understand why a certain idea or argument has been used in the text. They will ask you to draw conclusions about the information that has been stated in the passage. You need to locate the paragraph and read briefly to get the purpose. Now, this is very interesting. Let me ask you something. Have you realized that every single time we say something, we say it because we have a reason for doing so? That is to say, we want to attain some effect with our words. Let's imagine you are breaking up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and you say, for example, I'm so sorry. It's not you, it's me. What do you mean by that? If you say that, like, oh, so sorry, it's not you, it's me. What are you trying to say? What is the effect you are trying to cause on your couple or ex-couple in this case, right? The only effect you're trying to cause is to make that person feel totally irresponsible for the breakup, because you're trying to say, you know, it's not as if you were having some sort of thing that bothers me or something. It's just that maybe I just don't feel very comfortable with the relationship, right? So it's not your fault. You're not guilty. That's what they're trying to say. You have a reason. There is an effect you want to cause with those words. And this type of question, the purpose question, basically asks to respond that type of a scenario. That is to say, you have to find out what is the effect the author was trying to cause with a particular sentence he includes in his writing. Let me show you an example. It says here, why does the author mention the survival of snakes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles in paragraph 3? Look at the passage I have, or the paragraph here I have on the right side. It says, if true though, why did cold-blooded animals such as snakes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles survive the freezing winters and torrid summers? These animals are at the mercy of the climate to maintain a livable body temperature. It's hard to understand why they will not be affected, whereas dinosaurs were left too crippled to cope, especially if, as some scientists believe, dinosaurs were warm-blooded. Critics also point out that the shallow seaways had retreated from and advanced on the continent numerous times during the Mesozoic. So why did the dinosaurs survive the climatic changes associated with earlier fluctuations, but not with this one? Although initially appealing, the hypothesis of a simple climatic change related to sea levels is insufficient to explain all the data. Now we have a paragraph, right? And this question is asking about the sentence we have, or one of the sentences we have in this paragraph, which is snakes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles, right? And this, we have it actually at the very beginning of the reading passage, or of this paragraph, excuse me. And as I said, the question is basically, what effect is the author trying to cause with this sentence? Why did he put it there? There must be a reason. There must be something he's trying to explain, to express to these people. So you simply have to find it out, to understand and comprehend that purpose. And if you do so, you're done. That's what you have to do. Okay. So I'm not going to read the possible answers here. I want to give you some recommendations. Okay. So to effectively, respond this type of question, you must ask yourself, how does the alluded portion affect the whole text? It might initiate, conclude, support, or discard something. As I say, there are intentions behind every single sentence or word we utter with our mouth. Sometimes we want to initiate conversations. For example, if you go to a person and say, hey, how are you? What are you doing? You're initiating a conversation. If you say to somebody, I'm so sorry, just out of time, what are you trying to say? You're concluding, right? Your interaction with that person. Or if you say, yeah, I'm not sure about that, what are you trying to do? You're trying to cast doubt upon something. Or if you say, well, yeah, that's amazing. You're trying to support something. Or if you say, yeah, no, it's preposterous. What are you doing? You're discarding something. So as I said, there are intentions behind every single sentence we utter. And the idea is that these sentences, you also have to look for those intentions, okay? You have to look for the intentions behind every single sentence in order to understand, all right, what the author was trying to effect or cause with that particular word, phrase, or sentence, okay? How do you do that? By asking yourself, what is he trying to do? It's very easy to notice this because we are human beings and we understand communication, okay? So try to ask yourself, is this sentence trying to initiate something? Is it concluding something? Is it trying to support, to discard? What is it doing? Now, second thing, pay attention to the alluded portions mode. What I mean by this is that, you know, of course, some sentences are interrogative, some sentences are exclamative, subjunctive, indicative, and so forth. So if you see, for example, a question that automatically, you know, that particular sentence or phrase is trying to cast doubt upon something, right? Because why do you ask things or why do you question things, right? Because you want to cast doubt upon them. Because, for example, if you say, are you sure about that? Like, of course, you're trying to cast doubt upon, I don't know, a memory or a particular premise. So the same for exclamative expressions. If you say, come on, you're getting out of my nerves, right? Something like that. What are you trying to do? To make a point like somebody's freaking you out, basically. And if you say, well, that is possible, I guess. That is subjunctive, right? Because we are expressing possibility. But if you say, no, that's definitely the idea, then what you're doing, you are speaking in a very indicative mode, because in this indicative mode, what you're doing is to affirm something, right? So look at all those details, because those details tell you, as I say, the intentions behind these sentences. And as I say, there is always a reason why we utter or write something. We have to look for that particular reason, in this case, to respond these questions correctly. So look at the possible answers in this case. Why does the author mention the survival of snakes, lizards, turtles, and cockatriles in paragraph 3? And here we have the possible answers. It says, to argue that dinosaurs may have become extinct because they were not cold-blooded animals, to question the adequacy of the hypothesis that climatic change related to sea levels caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, or to present examples of animals that could maintain a livable body temperature more easily than dinosaurs, to support a hypothesis that these animals were not as sensitive to climate changes in the Cretaceous period as they are today. Okay. So what is it? Now look at the sentence in this case. In our paragraph, the sentence this question is asking for is in an interrogative mode. Look at it. So why did cold-blooded animals such as snakes, lizards, turtles, and cockatriles survive the freezing winters and torrid summers? As I told you, when you have a sentence in interrogative mode, automatically you can then, of course, conclude that the question or the sentence is trying to cast doubt upon something. So more or less, you know, you have an idea of what effect was the author trying to cause. He was trying to cast doubt upon something. All right. Now, let's continue reading. If you read this with the entire paragraph, you're going to notice that what the author of this paragraph does right after mentioning this sentence is to say, hey, you know, although initially appealing, the hypothesis of a simple climatic change related to sea levels is insufficient to explain all the data. So with all these details, you're getting okay. So he's trying to say that if these animals, snakes, lizards, turtles, and cockatriles, are very weak and, let's say, vulnerable animals that are basically at the expense of climate and temperature to survive, if they were not extinct, if they were not extincted because of these climatic changes thousands of years ago, but dinosaurs hypothetically did, how's that possible? If animals like dinosaurs are powerful, they have warm blood, if they are enormous, how are they possibly going to be extincted just because it's climatic alteration if weaker animals like snake, lizards, turtles survived, right? So as you can see, the correct answer in this case is the reason why he includes this sentence is to question the adequacy of the hypothesis that climatic change related to sea levels caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. So as I say, if you follow my recommendations, you're always going to get the correct answer because as I say, the idea is to find those two details, okay? Look at the first answer, for example, to argue that dinosaurs may have become extinct because they were not cold-blooded animals. Look at it. It's actually the contrary, right? Because what the author is trying to say is, hey, but they were warm-blooded animals. Like, how on earth they got extinct being warm-blooded animals if no warm-blooded animals as snakes, lizards, or turtles survived? So this is actually the other way around. As you can see, this first answer is trying to confuse you, right? Don't fall for that. The same for the third one, to present examples of animals that could maintain a livable body temperature more easily than dinosaurs, okay? As you can see, once again, the other way around, because what the passage tells you is that these animals were not actually able to tolerate this temperature more easily than dinosaurs, but that they were more vulnerable, right? So as you can see, the other questions merely try to confuse you. So please be very much careful. Any question with regard to this type of question, dear students, the purpose questions? Yes, Grisel, tell me.
Okay, thank you, teacher. Well, it's not about specifically of these kind of questions, but
Yes.
it's something about how to solve the general questions. After reading the question of the exercise, what would you recommend us to read first, the paragraph, or to read first the options we have?
Okay. Yeah, very good question. Thank you very much, Grisel. So, well, I mean, personally, that varies because at some points during the exam, I feel very much confident that I'm going to find the answer, given that the paragraph is very short. Now, if it is not very short, because sometimes paragraphs are disproportionately very long, I would recommend you to read the responses in order for you to know where to look for, right? In the very large paragraph, you have to look for the answer. But normally I don't read the responses first, but I try to absorb the paragraph first, and then I come back to the answers, just in case, of course, I don't get somehow, biased, because some answers, when you read them first, they somehow suggest to you, or they push you up to believe that is the correct answer, and then you go to the paragraph without actually paying attention and having already decided to go for that answer. So normally I would prefer to read the paragraph once I receive the question and I know, okay, it's in paragraph 3, so I read the paragraph 3, and then I go to the answers. But as I said, if it is the case that the paragraph is too long for you to look for the response, you can read the answers just in case you have some sort of guidance, right? And you have to, or you are able to know where to look for. But normally I would preferably read the paragraph first and then to go to the answers, just in case, of course, I can avoid any type of bias, right? Is that fine, dear Grisel?
Yes, teacher, thank you.
All right, my pleasure. Very good. Any other question, dear students? Any other thing that I could clarify? Please tell me. Questions? Right, I think there are no questions. Great. Anyways, let us continue. Third type of question, the TOEFL reading or reference question. Okay, let us discuss this one. So in reference questions, dear students, you are going to be asked to respond, what does a specific word refer to in its context? And you maybe are wondering right now, but isn't this the same than the vocabulary question? And I would say more or less, because in this case, you're going to be responding yes about the meaning of a word, but in the vocabulary question, notice that you were asked to respond about the meaning of generic words, okay? That are commonly used in academic and non-academic English. Now, In this other type of question that is called a reference question, you're going to be asked to respond about these type of questions specifically. Subject pronouns, as for example, it or they. Demonstrative pronouns as these, those, these, that. Possessive adjectives as its or their, and other reference words as the former, the later, one, once, another, other, or others. Let me show you an example. Look at this. It says, the word they in paragraph 3 refers to, sorry, and here we have paragraph 2, okay? And by the way, whenever you get this type of question, dear students, you are also going to get the word you are being asked for highlighted. I'm not sure if I mentioned that when we were in the vocabulary question, but just in case I didn't, notice that the word distance is highlighted, right? With a different color in this case. On the exam, it's also highlighted, okay? So it's very easy to locate it, all right? And every single time you get this type of question, like a vocabulary question, the word is highlighted, all right? So you are gonna be able to identify it very easily. The same for this type of question, okay? In which, as I say, they also ask for a meaning, the meaning of a word. In this case, the word they. And that particular word they refer to is this one that is highlighted, okay? As I say, on the exam, it's also highlighted, probably with gray, because they normally highlight their words and phrases with gray, but it's the same, right? So as you can see there, what does the word they, this one, like the one that is highlighted with yellow, mean in that context? And whenever you receive this type of question, what I recommend you is try to read the two previous and posterior sentences after the word, okay? I repeat, try to read the two previous and the two posterior sentences after the word. Because if you read the entire paragraph, you're going to get confused. In this type of question, when you have the reference questions, try to read just two previous sentences and maybe one or as a maximum two sentences posterior the sentence, or excuse me, the word. This way, as I say, you're going to avoid a lot of confusion and unnecessary information to respond to this question, because as I told you in the vocabulary question, the only information you need to respond to this question is the immediate context in which this word is placed into, all right, not the entire paragraph. So let us read this. Economic contact between Native Americans and Europeans can be traced back to the English and French fishermen of the coast of Canada in the 1500s. They, notice, traded guns and other weapons for beaver fur. Okay, and I will read it until there. Actually, I wouldn't read more because it's not necessary. Okay, so as I say, two previous sentences and one more if you want. Okay, now look at this. As I say, it's asking you, what does the word they mean in this case? Or in other words, what people in this case, right? Because it says they, it could also be a thing, right? If it is it or those, right? But in this case, they obviously refers to people. What people is this word referring to or making a reference to, right? And in this case, we have to respond this one. How do you do it? Very easily. Let me give you some recommendations. As your word will be highlighted, you must read one or two previous sentences to find the context, as I told you, and the reasoning trait, the idea of the portion. What do I mean by this? You have noticed, or have you noticed, dear students, that when we are speaking, normally we have some sort of vertical train when we are speaking or writing something. For example, let me tell you this sentence. Today, I'm going to go to the park, and tomorrow, I'll go to have dinner. There are two different ideas, right, in those sentences. And they are in a vertical sense, for example, or let's say in a horizontal sense. The first idea, this one, it's today I'm going to go to the park. And tomorrow, right, next idea, second one, I'm going to go to the park. And that's how we always speak and write, like idea per idea, idea per idea, idea per idea. We do not normally speak or utter two different ideas at the same time, but one by one. And the way you respond to this type of question is by locating the last idea the author had in mind when he wrote this word, in this case, they. Okay, so we have to locate, in this case, the last people, because of course we know in this case the word they refers to people, right? The last people the author had in mind when he wrote they. And that's how you're going to respond this type of question very much effectively every single time. Let us identify this reasoning in this case. It says economic contact between Native Americans and Europeans. So that's the first idea. It's saying there was some sort of contact or interaction between what? Native Americans and Europeans. Notice in this case, he is saying Native Americans and Europeans in a very generic sense. He's not saying what is specific Native Americans, what, I don't know, tribe, right? Because you know that the Native Americans are divided into different tribes, right? He's not mentioning what tribe of the Native Americans, nor he's mentioning what European people. He's just saying Europeans. Could be Spanish people, Portuguese people, Russian people, etc. But he's not saying it. He's just saying generic Europeans, right? Now let's continue. A second idea can be traced back to the English and French fishermen. Second idea, English and French fishermen. As you can see now, in his second idea, he has left the first one, that was Native Americans and Europeans in a generic sense. And now in his second idea, he's talking about English and French fishermen, specific Europeans, not just any European, but English and French Europeans. And the last idea he got, in this case, is off the coast of Canada in the 1500s. He's mentioning the place where this interaction took place. But as I told you, what was the last people he had on mind when he wrote this word, they? It wasn't the generic Europeans or the Native Americans in a very generic sense. The last people he had on mind was English and French fishermen. And that's why in this case, the correct answer is English and French fishermen, not Europeans, because if you notice, they are trying to confuse you there, right? Because they put Europeans. And maybe you say, well, this is more, or this is safer because it says Europeans, right? But no, as I say, the way you respond this one is by looking at the reasoning train, by looking at the order in which ideas are being placed, okay? And the last idea, in this case, the last people the author had on mind is the correct answer when he wrote this word, okay? Is there any question, dear students, with regard to this type of question, the reference question? Any doubt? No?
It was clear, teacher.
Okay, great, thank you. And if you notice, I didn't read the entire paragraph, right? If we continue, we can learn more about other people, etc. But better if you don't read it, because as I say, that could somehow bring some sort of bias to you in the sense that you're going to include more information that is not necessarily related to this particular word in its immediate context. Okay, so better if you just read, as I say, 2 previous sentences, 1 more, no more than that. Okay, great. Next question, inference question. All right, let's discuss this one. It's going to be great. So it says, inference question. In time for reading inference questions, you'll be asked to reason and draw a rational inference that could be made out of a whole paragraph or a little portion. Now, do not forget that an inference is simply a conclusion or assertion that could logically follow from a determined action, event, or circumstance. What do I mean by inference? Let me tell you an example. Imagine that you have a friend that always dresses in a very colorful manner. He always uses white shoes, white sneakers, whatever you prefer. He uses, I don't know, green or brown pants, and wears a beautiful t-shirt that is, I don't know, light blue, whatever. If your friend normally dresses that way, but suddenly, for some reason, one day, he appears totally in black, wearing black shoes, black pants, a black t-shirt, and you see that on his Facebook, he wrote, "I miss you so much." What can you infer out of that? What will be your inference? Of course, that person, very much likely, suffered the loss of a particular beloved being, right? Because normally in South America, we have the tradition that when somebody passes away, we dress this type of clothes in order to express our pain and suffering, right? And we write normally on Facebook or social media, "I miss you," or etc. So you can infer that, right? Because, well, if your friend normally dressed colorfully, but now in total black, and he wrote that message on his Facebook, that information and data you have suggests you very rationally that now, sadly, he suffered the loss of a person. Now, that is an inference because it's a rational conclusion out of information you have. But what about a second theory? Okay, I'm going to say this and tell me if this is an inference or not. If I tell you that according to my understanding, the reason why he started to dress like this is because aliens came to his house and stole his wardrobe, and they left for him all his black clothes. And that's the reason why he's just wearing these clothes. What would you think if I tell you that hypothesis? Like aliens came to his house, they stole their black clothes and their his wardrobe, and now he's not able to dress stylishly and colorfully. Of course, you would say that that is nonsense, right? And it's just preposterous. Why? For the very simple reason that it's not an inference. The information, the data you have, doesn't allow you to infer that. Maybe if your friend acts, I don't know, weirdly, and you see him transforming himself into an alien, you could say, oh, wow, that's weird. And you could say, well, probably he was, I don't know, abused by aliens or whatever. But if you do not see him like that, and you merely see him posting that on Facebook and wearing those black clothes, that information justifies that inference that somebody passed away and he's sad, but not that aliens came to his house. Okay, so as I say, there is a difference between inference and imagination. Inference is always justified in information and data you have. Imagination is just whatever you can think of, and that is not an inference. Okay, now what about this type of question? It says, which of the following can be inferred about Melville's poetry? Let us read this paragraph. Until the 1850s, Herman Melville primarily published novels, including Moby Dick, which would later become one of America's most famous and beloved novels. His novels, however, had extremely low sales, and Melville had to quit writing novels because no publisher would agree to print his books. In an effort to make more money from his writing, Melville chose to publish some poetry instead. Poetry was extremely popular and sold well in 19th century America. So Melville expected to make a profit from his first book of poems. These poems, however, were as unpopular as his novels and sold scarcely any copies. Well, so according to all this information we have received in the paragraph, which of the following can be inferred about Melville's poetry? Let us see some recommendations before. Don't forget that although you are asked to infer something, this doesn't mean you can separate yourself from the passage and let your imagination to fly. You must infer, yes, but you must do it only with the information provided with the passage. As I say, the only justification you can use in order to infer is the data they offer you here in the paragraph. You cannot use any external knowledge or your imagination as a basis to infer something. For example, maybe you are somebody who knows a lot of Melville's poetry and writings, but you shouldn't use that information you know about him if it is not included in the paragraph. The only information and warranty you have for inferring in this type of question is the paragraph you have here, no more than that, okay? So it's very important to have that on mind, okay? So don't use any other type of information, external data you may have available. Doesn't work. The only information you have to use as a justification for your inference must be here in the paragraph, okay? So let me show you. What about option number 8? It was not as well written as Melville's novels. Can we infer this out of the information we have here? I tell you, no, we cannot. Why? Because there is not a single sentence, dear students, that justifies our inference with regard to Melville's writings quality. In the paragraph, we have never received any type of suggestion or data that allows us to say, hey, maybe his poetry was not good and that's it. Nothing here tells something about how good were his writings or how good were his poetry or something like that. No, the only thing it mentions here is that he wanted to sell, he didn't, well, he didn't manage to sell his works and he moved to another area, etc. But nothing is told about the quality of those writings, right? Or can you see any sentence? No, right? Because there is no such a thing. So you cannot make an inference about the quality of his writing because there is nothing, not a single sentence justifying that inference here, okay? What about B? It was written primarily in iambic pentameter. I've never understood what is this, okay? I have to be honest with you. Iambic pentameter, I have no idea what is that. But maybe you are somebody who is a fan of this person, Herman Melville, and you know that he actually wrote in iambic pentameter. But I ask you, is that information here in the paragraph? No. Is there something that suggests what type of material or surface he used to write his novels and poetry on? Not at all, right? There's nothing like that. So we cannot infer that because, well, there's just no information justifying that particular claim. Okay, so we cannot infer that. What about D, or excuse me, C? It did not yield a significant profit for Melville. And I'll tell you, this is what we can actually infer. How do I know that? Because look at the question, dear student, or excuse me, at the paragraph. It says right at the beginning, his novels had extremely low sales. And in an effort to make more money from his writing, Melville chose to publish poetry instead. Now, what does it say? These poems, however, were as unpopular as his novels and sold scarcely any copies. So what is the paragraph telling you and suggesting? It's telling you, okay, you know what happened? Sadly, Melville wrote novels and he didn't sell them. Nobody wanted to purchase his novels. Who knows why? It is not said here. The fact is that he wanted to receive money. He was a writer. He wanted to be paid for his work. So he moved to poetry because he was very much confident that people would buy and purchase his poetry. Ironically and sadly, what happened? Nobody wanted to purchase his poetry as well. So what can you infer out of that? If nobody purchased his writings in novels and he didn't get money, and he changed to poetry in order to get money for his poetries, but he didn't also sell them very well, what is the rational conclusion? That he didn't receive money for his poetry, of course. So what is the inference, the rational conclusion? That the poetry Melville wrote did not yield a significant profit for Melville. As you can see, I am telling you which sentences justify my inference. And that is what you have to do every single time you approach one of these questions. Look for justifications, sentences that suggest that is the correct answer. If you cannot find justifications as I did right now, it's not the correct answer, okay? What about D? It was Melville's only possible way of making money. This is also wrong because nothing here tells us if Melville was merely a writer. Maybe he was also an engineer, or maybe he was some sort of businessman, and he had a lot of different manners to make money, but the only way he found to be very much, I don't know, passionate or enjoyable was writing. We do not know, nothing tells us. So we cannot infer it, okay? We cannot say if that was his only way to make money or something like that, or if it wasn't, we cannot say nothing about that. Why? Because nothing in the paragraph tells us, suggests to us such a thing, okay? So is there any question, dear students, with regard to this type of question? Something that I could clarify? Please tell me. Questions? Is there any question?
It was clear, teacher.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we can go to the last type of question tonight. Sorry. In this type of question, that is called, by the way, reading essential information question, you will be asked to convey the same information than a given portion, but using different words. It's important for you to remind that the correct answers must convey all the information given in the little portion, not just some. This is, dear students, the most easy type of question for you to understand. Why? Because I know that all of you are from South America. And this is, by the way, the classical type of question we receive in high school, in the university, when we are, of course, performing on examinations. For example, normally, right, when we were in high school or when we were in the university, our professor told us, hey, tomorrow exam from page 20 until 50 of this book, please prepare yourself, right? So that night you read from page 20 until page 50, and you try to memorize all that information to make your notes, etc. Next day, you came to the exam, they gave a paper, and it said, according to page 23, in the, in the French Revolution, Napoleon Bonaparte was, I don't know, was 2 points, a very important general, a servant, I don't know, whatever. So you respond according to the page, right? Because the page 23 of your book told you who Napoleon Bonaparte was. So the only thing you are doing is to respond to the question, what did the passage say about this? What did the passage say about Napoleon Bonaparte? Or what did the page, in that case, right, say about Napoleon Bonaparte? And it's exactly the same here. And think about it, that's the type of question we always receive, right, in exams in South America. And that is exactly also the same here. Okay, so look at it. It says, the sentence in paragraph 6, all right? Between industrialization, the reduced population of Native Americans and the segregation of them into the reservations contributed to the end of Indian trade is most similar to. Oh, so sorry. You know, I got confused. This is not the question I was telling you. It's actually this one, the factual question. So sorry, the detailed question. This is other type of question. So sorry, just my blunder. This is essential information question. You know what is this? This is, for example, have you ever known somebody who speaks very difficultly? There are people who have a very advanced language, right? And they speak very difficultly because we are very much sophisticated in their way of speaking. So whenever you meet this type of people, you say, right, could you please repeat it, but more simply? Or probably you say, could you please repeat it in Spanish, right? And that person speaks in Spanish, right? But it's so complex that you don't understand him or her. So you say, could you please explain it more simply? It's the same here. They're going to give you a very long sentence. And when they ask you is to find one option that conveys the same information, but more simply. As simple as that. It's actually way easy to understand, okay? In this case, we have the sentence. It says, between industrialization, the reduced population of Native Americans and the segregation of them into the reservations contributed to the end of the Indian trade. Is most similar to. And here, by the way, in the paragraph, you're going to get that particular sentence highlighted. As you can see, I also had it highlighted here with yellow because, of course, I want to illustrate how it's going to be on the exam. All right, so please look at it. Now, as I say, the only thing is you read the sentence, by the way, merely that sentence. Don't read the rest of the paragraph, just the sentence they highlight for you to respond about, okay? Not the entire paragraph, just their sentence in this case, okay? Whenever you receive this type of question, just the sentence, not the entire paragraph. So you read the sentence, it's a very long sentence, as you can see, and you have to look for a more simple way to express the same information, as simple as that. In this case, which one could it be? My recommendation for this, dear students, is the correct answer will not omit any information of the portion, nor will it pay too much attention to a single element and misrepresenting the others. The correct answer, dear students, as I say, must explain this more simply, but that doesn't mean that it can obviate or take something out. If one of the responses here takes one of the informations or data mentioned here, is not the correct answer. It must mention the same information, but more simply. I repeat, it must mention the same information, but more simply, no more than that, okay? Look at the possible answers. So Indian trade came to an end because of segregation, industrialization, and declining populations. So is this the correct answer? Let's see. What about 2? The United States industrialized their production, segregated from Native Americans, and entered conflicts that decreased the Native American population? No, okay? And by the way, the correct answer is the first one. Just we're trying to make it a little bit more, you know, to attain suspense, let's say. But the correct answer is the first one. Indian trade came to an end because segregation, industrialization, and declining populations. Why? Because if you read the sentence, what it says is, between industrialization, that is to say, because of industrialization, the reduced population of Native Americans and the segregation of them into the reservations, all of that contributed to the end of the Indian trade. And here what it says, Indian trade came to an end, basically the same, right? Because of segregation, industrialization, and the declining populations. The same, but more easily explained. As I say, this type of question is always about that. Reading a little bit complex sentence, large sentence, finding a more simple and shorter manner to say it. Okay? As simple as that. In this case, the first one. The second one, the US, industrialized, whatever, is not the correct answer. Why? Because it doesn't say that. It doesn't say here that the US industrialized its production or something in the in the highlighted sentence we have, it doesn't say anything about the US if you read it, or does it? No, right? It doesn't say anything about the US. The rest of the paragraph talks about the US, but in our sentence, and remember, you have to care about the sentence alone. It doesn't say anything about the US, so that cannot be the correct answer, because as I say, it's adding something that is not in our sentence, and we have to locate the answer that conveys the same information than our highlighted sentence, but more simply, not to add more things or to take out details. Okay, that's the idea. Is there any question, dear students, with regard to this type of questions? Something that I could clarify? Please tell me. Yes, Grisel, please tell me.
Teacher, in this kind of questions, I think it will be the same as the previous one, right? We have to use the information given in the paragraph. Am I right?
Yeah, certainly. You read the paragraph. Well, in this case, not the paragraph. Maybe that's what I would comment upon. Not the paragraph, but the sentence. Yes, exactly, okay. The sentence, because in this case, the paragraph mentions information that is out of the scope. In this case, we do not care about the paragraph, yes, but we care about the sentence. So you are right when you say, yes, we have to take into consideration what the sentence says and to discard any other type of information that is present in the paragraph or on our mind, and to merely pay attention to the sentence itself. And with that, we can respond to the question very easily. Okay, dear Grisel, but very good observation.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Any other question, dear students? Any other thing that I could clarify here? No questions? Okay, very good. So we're going to stop here, okay, tonight. Tomorrow we're going to finalize this, and hopefully we're going to practice this Friday, all right? So as I said, we are learning a lot, and trust me, all this is going to make sense when you practice, okay? You're going to notice it. Oh, this is an inference question, you're going to say, and you're going to respond because you know how to respond, okay? So let me stop sharing my screen, and please help me with your kind responses as I take the traditional poll tonight, and then we're going to finalize our class, okay? So please help me with that as I take your assistance tonight. All right, let me look for you. If you have any question, any commentary, please let me know. All right, here. So it's here present our dear Grisel Paz.
Yes, teacher, present.
Thank you very much, Grisel. What about Daniela Lourdes? Okay, what about Liliana Sonia? What about Danilo Torrico?
Yeah, I'm here, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Danilo. There you are. What about Arlette Gabriela?
I'm here.
Right, thank you very much, Arlette. And finally, Daniela Castellanos.
I'm here, teacher.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Fantastic. There you are. Well, thank you very much, guys, for your kind responses. I'm going to be seeing you tomorrow in order to continue with this. And please have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much. See you.
Tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, teacher.